Yeah. My name is Kent Jacobs. I'm president of FLYHT Aerospace. Alana Forbes is our CFO who will share the presentation today. Just a note, there are some forward-looking statements in the presentation that we're going to be giving. So FLYHT has been in business for about 20 years. We've primarily been in the satcom aircraft data analysis, real-time analysis, and data transmission side. So we've built avionics products, we've analyzed that data, and we provide that information to the airlines and the industry as they see fit, as they need. But over the last 2 years, during COVID, we've retooled, we've rethought the company a little bit. And this quote from Barry Eccleston, from former Airbus CEO, is a great, it's a good introduction to FLYHT. And what he's identified is that FLYHT is uniquely positioned with our understanding of aircraft data, of aircraft systems, to be able to provide a different way for airlines to use that information. We'll talk a little bit about how the airlines want to use that information. It's different than they have traditionally wanted it. They're looking for something more. They're looking for something different. Here are some quotes from some pretty major players. If you look at the WestJet one and the Frontier one, it's quite interesting. WestJet, they don't want to receive more reports. They don't want emails or dashboards that tell them that last quarter they lost money. They don't want to see that the pilots were operating the aircraft in an inefficient manner last week. They want to do something now. They want to actually be able to modify their operation, modify the way that the aircraft are being operated in a meaningful way. Look at the Frontier quote. I don't know if people know what an APU is. It stands for Auxiliary Power Unit. Every commercial aircraft has one. These are massive gas turbine engines located inside the fuselage of the aircraft. They're huge. If you saw one, you would be shocked to think that there are 3 engines on a twin. They're in the back of the aircraft. They burn a lot of fuel. They're very expensive to maintain, and they're terrible for the environment. They're typically run on the ground. They supply power, electricity, air conditioning, heating. If you want to go onto an aircraft that doesn't have ground power, you would have to fire up the APU to be able to run the vacuum cleaner to clean the aircraft. So airlines want to know how, APU is just one example, but they want to know how can they modify their operations such that the APUs are being used in a meaningful, non-detrimental way. So what did FLYHT do during the last couple of years during the pandemic? Here's a quick summary of what we did in the past, kind of where we are today and what we're looking to in the future. For the last 2 years, we've focused on rebuilding. We've been adding to our products. We've been adding to our geographic footprint around the world. We're changing the way that we want to do some of our work. We're directing more towards SaaS, a little bit away from the hardware. We didn't just survive COVID. We actually reformed the company during this time. We have new hardware solutions, a new focus on net zero for supporting our customers. We have new products, offices, and customers. If we look at the present, we've had our best revenue quarter since COVID began, so for the last 2.5 years. UK Met recently announced the purchase of one of our products to incorporate on a fleet yet to be identified in Europe. We have today, hour and a half ago, a press release for a software and IP license order of 7.1 million Canadian dollars to a customer that's been using our products for 10 years. And we have launch customers for a new product, new avionics product called the AFERS Edge. It's going to be initially set to run on the 737, A320, on the Q400s, the large turboprop, and another ATR, another large turboprop. So the future, we're focusing on SaaS revenues, right? Driven by the Edge adoption, and I'll spend quite a bit of time talking about the Edge and what it's going to do, and the focus that we have on actionable intelligence. Actionable intelligence being the information that we provide to the airlines to modify their operations, right? No more reports, no more spreadsheets. What can you do right now? Go turn the APU off. We're going to focus on the airlines and help them towards their net zero opportunities. A lot of airlines are starting to talk about that. You've probably heard about Alaska Airlines and their aggressive approach that they're taking. Other American airlines will be following that. Europe and European companies are doing it already. So we're driving towards profitability, cash flow positive. It's well underway. We've got some great new relationships with companies like AWS, Amazon Web Services, and CETA. We'll talk about those next. So who is CETA? CETA is an air transport communication and information technology company. They're a giant. You can see 400 plus airline customers, and they service more than 18,000 aircraft. FLYHT has a formal agreement with them to leverage the new Iridium Block 2 satellite network that Iridium launched over the last couple of years. So FLYHT has traditionally worked in the original Iridium network. That's the global coverage network. But the new one that offers larger bandwidth, cheaper prices, that's where FLYHT has actually worked with CETA to have an agreement where we can use that network through them. Iridium isn't just handing those relationships out. CETA had one. We worked with them, and now we have that ability. But in addition to that, CETA and FLYHT have agreed to start sharing the... So sorry. I swore I would never do that in my life. That's awful. This picture's off. In addition to that relationship regarding Iridium, FLYHT and CETA FLYHT is selling some of CETA's airborne cockpit services. So we have the opportunity to work with their sales organization at the same time. That means that FLYHT and CETA are actually partnering now in the sales opportunities. And when you have 400 airline customers, 18,000 aircraft, that's a much bigger opportunity than FLYHT on their own with 80 people would be able to support, would be able to get. So we're aligning those efforts. Another observation with CETA is that they don't build hardware. They're not a hardware provider. They're strictly in the software side, and they want a place to run their software on aircraft. Well, the AFERS Edge, which we'll talk about, is that product. It's a great way for them. The AFERS Edge can be partitioned in a way that third-party software can be run on it. Another partnership that we've formed over the last 2 years is with AWS, Amazon Web Services. So AWS has a travel and hospitality group, travel and hospitality competency, where they allow companies to achieve a level of technical expertise with their products. And FLYHT has worked really hard over the last year to actually get to that level, to get to that point. We received that certification a few months ago when we press released it. But it does so much more than just mean that we develop software on the cloud with AWS in a meaningful way. It means that we understand their products, and it means that Amazon is actually working with us and their customers. So they're bringing us to some of their customers when they see a need for a company for the products and services that FLYHT provides. They actually connect us with their other customers. It's a powerful relationship. I've talked a little bit about the AFIRS Edge, and this is a really important product for FLYHT. This is the third generation AFIRS unit. AFIRS stands for Automated Flight Information Reporting System, third generation one. And the biggest difference with this is it's got 3G, 4G, 5G capabilities. So that means that when the Edge is on an aircraft on the ground, there's a pipe now between that aircraft and whatever operations are running on the ground that is huge. It's just not there before, right? There is no avionics product right now that has a 5G radio capability to supply information from the ground to the aircraft or from the aircraft to the ground. QAR data is the same data that's recorded on the black box. This is information that any airline would use to analyze and run their FOQA, their operational quality programs. It's mandatory data for airlines to capture. Every airline on the planet has to capture this data. And there are some existing products, about 15 years old, that use 2 and 3G technology to wirelessly transmit that data. The Edge does it with 5G. As the world shuts down the 2G, 3G, and eventually the 4G networks, the Edge will be the product that airlines are going to use to transmit that data. This is a $1 billion of obsolete hardware opportunity. There are up to 35,000 units on the planet that are transmitting that data with 2G and 3G capabilities right now that are going to be retired as those networks retire. When they shut down the 2G, 3G towers around an airport, it's over. No more data transmits through that. There are opportunities from competitors to kind of upgrade their system to go to a 3G or a 4G. Nobody is working on 5G yet. I just want to make sure that people understand there are no concerns with the 5G network and avionics. I don't know. That was in the news a little while ago. People might have heard about it, thinking about the FAA and certain airlines here in the U.S. The AFIRS product has the ability to tune out different bands of the 5G network, and there are absolutely no concerns with transmitting that data when the aircraft is parked. This product will be the first to use embedded AWS software on board the avionics package. That's leveraging our AWS relationship and our partnership. It'll be Iridium Certus capable. We talked about that a little bit. The ability to run third-party software on this product means that it can be used as an avionics data loader. This is a very valuable situation for maintenance of aircraft, where every 28 days you have to update the software on certain systems on the aircraft. We reused a lot of the FLYHT avionics software from our previous units. It kept our R&D costs down on it. We already talked about the addressable market of 35,000 units. But maybe the biggest thing about the SaaS, or the AFERS Edge, is that it's an enabler for our SaaS opportunities. The Edge reaches out and touches dozens of systems on the aircraft that give us access to data that is going to change the way that we can provide that information back to the airline. That's actionable intelligence. And that's where we leverage kind of the pedigree, the history of FLYHT leading up to now, leading up to the transformation that occurred during COVID. In addition to the AFIRS Edge, over the COVID time, we purchased the WVSS2 sensor. This is a relative humidity sensor. FLYHT has been in the business of capturing and transmitting aircraft-based observations for 15 years. Relative humidity is absolutely key to aircraft-based observations. The value of an observation goes up 4, 5, 6 times to a weather modeling company when you add the relative humidity. So our existing weather business is growing, it's profitable. All revenues are paid by government bodies. We're working with major agencies around the world to get more of this data into their weather modeling systems. And together with other relative humidity products that we have, we can put a relative humidity sensor on any aircraft. Maybe the last biggest thing that occurred during the COVID years is that FLYHT purchased a company in Frankfurt, Germany called Crossconsense. And Crossconsense are expert in the aircraft maintenance software. So now you've got this beautiful combination of a company in Calgary that is used to and understands aircraft data, real-time analysis, moving into a SaaS world, providing actionable intelligence. The one part that was sometimes missing in our work and our products was the relative maintenance data for an individual aircraft. Right? We wanted to take what was happening on the aircraft and you marry it up with the history of the aircraft. We didn't have access to the history of the aircraft. Now we do. If you look at the customers that Crossconsense deals with, EasyJet, Lufthansa, Swiss, they're a powerful company. They're very well represented in Europe. So we've expanded our footprint in Europe immediately. We have sales opportunities now where FLYHT Calgary and FLYHT Frankfurt are able to cross-sell between the organizations. And what we've got is an unmatched data set, right? We're building a data lake around this information. We've got a data science team that is using artificial intelligence and machine learning to actually look at the data. But by adding this maintenance data, we've kind of finished off the picture. We now have something that's actually difficult even for an airline to put together. It's almost easier for a third party to come along and work with the operations side and work with the maintenance side of an airline to get this information. We often get asked why we should be on your screen. So a lot of the products that I'm talking about, a lot of the services, the way that we're moving forward are helping our customers achieve net zero. Think Alaska Airlines, that is going to be the template for what the other airlines in North America are following over the next 3 or 4 years. AFIRS Edge solves that 2G, 3G obsolescence problem. We know it's coming. Over the next 4 years, those towers are literally going to be shut down and those aircraft are going to be stranded with data that can't get off the aircraft. It's a huge opportunity for FLYHT. And the Edge, the same product that's going to provide that opportunity to get the information off via 5G, becomes the enabler for our software. So what you're going to see is an increase in our hardware sales over the next 2 or 3 quarters, 4 quarters. And that's when, after that, the SaaS revenues start to follow as we start to have access to that data. Our relationship with AWS and CETA, powerful, gives us new opportunities to work with different customers and be exposed to parts and different groups that we never would be able to on our own. We're continuing our history in weather observations by adding the WVSS and the relative humidity capabilities. We're growing organically and inorganically, but always with a SaaS focus, always with that recurring revenue in mind focus as we go forward. And then we actually have we have the ability with our WVSS sensor to actually retune it in different ways and look for other greenhouse gases as we fly, not just relative humidity. That's maybe a little bit off. That's a little further down. FLYHT is taking the ESG and the supporting the aviation industry to reach net zero by 2050 very seriously. And Swoop Airlines, that's an ultra-low-cost operator in Canada, is working directly with FLYHT right now. We're actively in a program with them, supported by their president. This is the low-cost operator for WestJet Airlines. And what we're doing is tackling the APU problem. So when I mentioned that APU problem, the third gas turbine on a twin engine, that's what we're doing. Charles Duncan, president of Swoop, wants this solved for his airline. We will get to the bottom of it. We're working on it with them right now actively to make sure that they know exactly when those APUs are running and they shouldn't be, and providing them the information as to how they can actually change their operation.
I get the numbers part.
Oh, sorry.
So looking at our revenue, we changed our profile a fair bit geographically with the addition of Crossconsense out of Germany. You can see in 2021 when it was FLYHT Canada together with our US arm, we had very little presence in Europe, as Kent mentioned, heavily throughout North America, and we've got some business in the rest of the world, Southeast Asia, China, a little bit in Europe, but it was a pretty small portion of our profile. And with the addition of Crossconsense last quarter, our 2022 we're much more diversified geographically. And we found that to be particularly helpful during the pandemic as subsequent waves of the pandemic hit different parts of the world at different times. So when one part of the world is recovering, we're really seeing that sort of recovery in our revenues, and it's kind of making up for some of the areas of the world who are in complete shutdown. Looking at our sources of revenue, SaaS is at about 53% of our revenues over the past year at 65% gross margins. Crossconsense's revenues are about 80% recurring, which is helpful, especially with our renewed focus on recurring revenue streams. Hardware, those are the upfront AFERS units and soon to be the upfront charges and cost of installation kits and the AFERS Edge units. Licensing has been a great source of revenue for us in the past and continues to be at 14% last year. And that licensing revenue is directly tied to our licensing arrangement and sale of modems and IP through our partner L3, who the press release that came out an hour and a half ago that Kent was referring to. That's that product line. And then we also have a small technical services component. So just taking a step back, looking high level at FLYHT over the past 12 months, we've posted $14 million in revenues. $25 million in backlog was our number at the end of Q1, and then this most recent sale will add to that. The actual signed contracts have a total of more like $50 million. But we started scrubbing that, particularly going through the pandemic, looking at what our customers' plans were, what we thought was reasonable and feasible in the near to intermediate term in actually executing on those contracts, given the changing, our customers' changing plans. Looking at the last 12 months of revenues, 45% has been SaaS. That was Q2 last year through to Q1 this year, which we just released recently. And those gross margins on SaaS, both for our existing business and with the addition of the Crossconsense business, is producing about 65% gross margin. Our retention rate has been really great. Our solution's been really sticky. Once we have hardware installed on the aircraft, the only time we really see customers leave is through a bankruptcy or some sort of other catastrophic event in their business. and what ends up happening in a lot of those cases is the hardware is installed on the aircraft. So the aircraft goes back to the lessor sends it out to another customer of theirs for use, and this new customer says, oh, what's the safer system? And how can I access the data and the resulting actionable intelligence that's coming off of that aircraft? And they give us a call. We worked with one of our prospective customers in the U.S. around and developing an ROI for our latest set of SaaS products under our Actionable Intelligence line, and they were able to build up an ROI and verify an 800% ROI, which is pretty compelling. And we've been around for 23 years. Our customers have flown over 3 million flights with AFIRS on board, so that's producing a lot of data on 4.7 million hours of voice and data services that we've been providing for our customers. And so just as a last look at the highlights of what FLYHT has been working on, what we've been focusing on, over the pandemic, again, we shifted the company and our focus from being a purely hardware satcom solutions provider to more of our revenue being based on a recurring basis. We're really excited about the Edge, the first 5G LTE WQAR. We think it's going to really contribute to our success, especially given the large TAM. Our customer relationships remain strong, and all of the customers who have survived the pandemic are still with us. So that really validates and affirms that the service that we're providing is really valuable to their operations. We've realized $2 million in permanent cost savings. We've been able to make adjustments in several aspects of the business that allow us to emerge from the pandemic just a bit leaner. We talked about our backlog, and looking at our balance sheet, we ended Q1 with $3.3 million in cash. The debt on the balance sheet there's very little that's near term. We have 4 programs through the Canadian government that we've obtained funding through, and one of those we continue to obtain funding through. Those loans are all no interest or low interest loans. And most recently, we have been adding some interesting characters with a lot of experience to our team. Willie Cecil, he spent a lot of time selling several years back several of the systems that the Edge will now address. So he's very familiar with those types of problems and the customers who will face those problems. We, over the past year, have really focused on not only organic growth but also inorganic, with the purchase of the WVSS2 sensor and then the purchase of Crossconsense, the German subsidiary from Q1. And we've also most recently begun preparations for an uplist to a national U.S. exchange. Our share price, our market cap don't allow for us to meet the requirements currently, but we have lots of plans to get there. Okay, and this is just I'll leave you with a picture of our customers and our partners that we've worked with to date. Do you have any questions for us? Go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation. Appreciate it. Is it fair to say that Rockwell Collins is the competitor, probably the only competitor to CETA? Is that, Ken, this is a question for you. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
And then I have some follow-up questions.
Sure. Yeah, at that level, at the level of providing ACAR services, absolutely. Rockwell and ARINC are the competition to CETA.
Sorry, Rockwell and?
As ARINC. Yeah, so Rockwell, yeah, purchased.
And so is there anything, and I'm sure each of the companies, like reps for each of the companies will tell you different stuff, but in your opinion, is there anything fundamentally different in the service offering between CETA and Rockwell? And further to that, by you sort of taking the lead in CETA, and I know they're bigger, I think, numerically does that allow CETA to address these efficiencies that they're offering, or what can you tell me about that?
Yeah, they're interesting questions. Look, I think part of the reason that FLYHT and CETA formed a relationship is because CETA isn't in the hardware game, whereas Rockwell is. We actually compete with Rockwell on some SATCOM systems. So the relationship there was never going to, we weren't going to have the same opportunities. And do we provide something for CETA then? I think that's what you're asking. And the answer is yeah, we do. The AFERS unit, the AFIRS Edge, provides that ability for CETA to actually do things that they can't do right now. Small company providing that platform on the aircraft that CETA can leverage and can use.
And if you identify certain functionality modules or classified that you were specifically working on with CETA now that they can sort of roll out to their customer base, or
yeah, we're actively working with them right now. I can't talk about the things that we're actually talking about doing with them. But yeah, we're at the stage where we're actually working on with their business development side as to what programs we want to implement with software. We're right at that stage working with CETA. Yeah.
In the booth, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You're good.
Thanks. Are we?
Yeah,
Great.
You can wrap it up. Any questions?
That's it.
Follow?
No.
Okay, cool.
Thank you so much for the questions. I appreciate the time. It was great to see some people. Hopefully people will pick it up on the webcast as well. Thanks.